Joining me is the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. We've had the monthly inflation number out today. What's your read? Are you encouraged by it?
Well, it hasn't come down, Kieran. We're continuing to see well above target inflation. We've seen inflation in the last 18 months, price increases of around 10% now. It's a big number. Australians are all paying that. Insurance, rents, we're seeing very, very big numbers continuing. And there's no sign of any improvement in the collapse of standard of living that we've seen for Australians in the last 18 months, Kieran. So an 8.6% reduction in the standard of living of the average Australian, that's about $8,000 a year. That's a combination of rising prices, which we saw again in the CPI figures today, 12 interest rate increases, a 27% increase in personal income taxes. And this government is not even close to having a plan to reverse that collapse in living standards. And Australians are having to work out how to deal with it right now. It's a painful process.
So you don't share the confidence of some economists who are suggesting this might actually see the RBA cut rates sooner?
Well, I'm not going to get into forecasting the RBA, but what I will say is Australians want their standard of living back. It's collapsed. 18 months, 8.6%, $8,000. They want their standard of living back, and there's nothing in the government's plan that's going to improve that. In fact, they're taking us in the opposite direction. They're taking household budgets so they can spend money on it, a 27% increase in personal income taxes. There's no sign that the 12 interest rate increases that have happened under Labor are going to be reversed, nothing like that.
But the tax changes.
And there's no reversal of the 10% increase in prices. Well, the tax changes are a drop in the ocean.
They went through the Parliament. But is that why they're popular, though? Because people are hurting and
we supported
the broader benefit?
Yeah, we supported the tax relief. As you know, what we don't support is the way it was funded, which was by breaking a promise that the Prime Minister and Treasurer had made over 100 times, something they'd voted for. I see the Prime Minister out today fighting Tories. That's what he loves to do. It's all politics for the Prime Minister. Well, he needs to focus on the number one issue, which is the collapse in the standard of living of the average Australian household.
He's putting the challenge to you, though, last night, and he held a news conference again. He's been making the case again today. If you're going to take a different tax plan to the election, you've got to explain to people where the cuts are, where the money's coming from.
Well, I'll tell you the challenge.
How do you respond to his challenge?
I will come back to that, but I'll tell you the challenge for the Prime Minister is to start focusing on the collapse of living standards for Australians in a way which reflects the scale of that collapse. 8.6%, $8,000 for the average Australian. Now, $20,000 or $30,000 for Australians with a mortgage. And this government and this Prime Minister is more interested in fighting the opposition. He needs to focus on the main game here. Now, your question was about policies we'll take to the next election. Well, we will take a strong tax reform package to the next election. We've already announced parts of it, accelerated depreciation, getting it back to where it needs to be to get small business investing again and growing. We're seeing small businesses collapsing at a rate of knots right now. We need to see that kind of tax reform package, and we'll announce
there be something
before the election.
Back into stage 3, any of those elements?
I know you really want me to announce our tax package on your program today, Kieran, but I'm not going to do it. But I am going to say it's an important focus for us. But Labor's taken.
Have you landed it yet?
Labor's taken
internally.
You know, Kieran, you will try to ask the question 25 different ways to get me to announce something today, and I'm not going to do it. But I will say that we haven't seen a plan coming forward from Labor that we think even comes close to reversing the collapse of living standards that Australians have seen over the last 18 months. The Prime Minister was distracted all last year with his voice. Now he's focused on just playing politics, and it's unfortunate that that's what he does in his press conference.
Some of your colleagues have been raising concern about the plan to remove Section 11 from the RBA Act. That gives Parliament power to override the RBA. Do you share those concerns, or will the coalition support the reforms to the RBA as put to the Parliament?
Well, there's a couple of things I'd say about this. The first is that we've got a committee working their way through this now, and I'll wait the outcomes of that committee. The second is something that I've said a number of times, which is that we're deeply concerned about the Treasurer stacking the new RBA board. It's clear he wants to clean out the board and stack his own people on it. And we've said we want continuity of the existing board onto the new Monetary Policy Committee because we need stability in setting interest rates and, most importantly, beating inflation. The way you get lower interest rates is you beat inflation, and that requires a central bank that is absolutely focused on the task. You know, having Jim Chalmers...
It's important to have one that has bipartisan support.
Well,
do you accept that? That you want to get to a situation where this doesn't become a fight? It shouldn't become a political fight, the RBA, should it?
Well, I'll tell you what would make it a fight is if Jim Chalmers stacks it with his mates. And he is opening this up so that he can do exactly that. He's refused to come forward in the legislation with a way to transition the current board onto the new Monetary Policy Committee. And that's a fight that is unnecessary, but is about Labor playing politics again.
So when do you land your final position on this, once the Economics Committee gets back on its review?
We'll wait for the Economics Committee, but also we're waiting for Labor. I mean, we haven't heard from Jim Chalmers.
They say they've consulted you a lot.
You know, I have been very clear to Labor that if this is a pathway for Jim Chalmers to stack the RBA with his mates, then it's unacceptable to us. And he hasn't come back with a response that deals with that, and I'm awaiting that eagerly. Kieran, I really am.
Okay, there's the message to Jim Chalmers from Angus Taylor. Thanks for joining us.
Good on you, Kieran.